Now we're coming to another area of mistranslations of imposing on the text that I love, and I'll tell you why. Because what Murad has done, he has looked at the text. Remember, we're looking at the Arabic now, and we're going back to the 7th century Arabic. So he's taking it back as a linguist and as a historian back to the context that it should be. And what he's finding is that every time they write the Arabic or they write the word, they actually impose on it another agenda. And in this case, it's the agenda from the standard Islamic narrative, from the way in the past, from the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th century. They're taking what they know about from that century and imposing on the text here in the 7th century. So the words that they use in the Arabic now, and the words that they, or even the way they have written it, is based on what the standard Islamic narrative says, which to me is absolutely gobsmacking, because that suggests to me that they never went to the original text. They've already got an agenda built into it. Is that not the case, Murad?
Yes, exactly. And as we will see in these examples, uh, they do not have shame just stuffing stuff in there as if it was in the original text. Sometimes it's not even in brackets. This is to fool the Western audience. It's a disgrace, to be honest.
Let's get right into it. This is going to be a long video because there's lots of examples. He has about, oh, I want to say about 10 or 11 examples where he's going to show how this manipulation has gone on and how we need to stop this and go back to what it should be. Wait till you see what he's come up with. Okay, over to you, Murad. Tell us, give us some more, and let's open up your PowerPoint.
Okay, I will jump straight into the PowerPoint. Okay, so we will now look at standard Islamic narrative-based translations. And these examples that I'm about to show uh, are when translators, they actually stuff in there that's not there. And this stuff comes from the standard Islamic narrative. The problem is you are fooling the West this way. As a translator, if you have dignity, then you just put what's in there in the Arabic and then let the reader assume, because he is an adult. You cannot just stuff in there that was never there.
Okay, Murad, just for those people who probably are new to you and new to this material, what do you mean by standard Islamic narrative? I know what you mean, and probably maybe two-thirds of the people here know. What are you talking about? What is that exactly?
Well, this is basically the narrative that came after the Quran. This is the hadith of Muhammad. We are not exactly sure if
Which
this
are the
hadith is,
sayings of Muhammad? So hadith would be sayings.
yeah, the sayings of Muhammad, the story of Muhammad, the actual story, his biography. It is written much later, so you cannot borrow from it because there is problem with its historical authenticity. And the asbab al-nuzul in Arabic, meaning the reason why the verses descended. They say, well, this verse descended because, for example, Omar, he wanted to make the women wear the veil. This is something that's a tradition that is later passed down from the wrong place and the wrong time. So you cannot superimpose that on the Quran. This is the standard Islamic narrative. You can't use it to superimpose it on the Quran, which came in earlier. And by now we know that maybe a big chunk of it is actually Syriac and has nothing to do with these people in modern day Saudi Arabia. That's the idea.
Okay. So these are the sirah, which is the biography, the hadith, which are the sayings, the tafseer, which would be the commentaries, and the tarikh, which would be the histories, all written by people like Ibn Hisham, Al-Waqidi, Sahih Muslim, Ibn Dawud, Tirmidhi, people like Al-Tabari and others. So these are what every Muslim needs to go to know how to walk, talk, eat, drink, and sleep. But they're written, as you say, in the 9th, 10th, and 11th, as we're going to put up in just a few weeks, they're not even written in the 9th, 10th, 11th. They own their earliest extant manuscripts for any of these. We have one that's from the 9th century. All the others are from the 11th, 12th, 13th, up until the 16th century, many, many hundreds of years later, redacted back to someone named Ibn Hisham or al-Waqidi or al-Bukhari. Al-Bukhari himself, probably the most authoritative, his earliest extant manuscript it doesn't begin to appear until the 12th century, and it's all after the 12th century. So this is much, much too late. And that's why you're saying, Murad, isn't it? You cannot take those such late texts and inferences and impose them into a 7th century Arabic or in understanding, because you're talking about 5 to 6 to 800 years later. And we know even in English, what we say today and what we said 500 years ago, the words have changed. I guess the example you gave was the word gay. And the word gay today means quite a bit different than it did just even 100 years ago, to say nothing of 5 to 800 years ago. So it's very important that you now look at the standard narrative and pinpoint that and show that this is a bias. They should never have been here. They should never have used these as their basis.
Yes, exactly. And I just don't want to divert too much, but one final point about this. There is a Moroccan um, uh, scholar and academic who is actually following Sahih al-Bukhari through the manuscripts. And he found that you only get a complete Bukhari by the Ottoman times.
Mhm.
So, as you say, the very first manuscript, 12th century, but finalized, it's through the Ottoman times. So this might
16th
be,
century. 6th
yeah,
century.
so this problem might be even bigger than we assume and bigger than Yasser Qadi assumes.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Great stuff. Right. Now we've given an introduction. Now everybody knows what the standard Islamic narrative is. What have you found, Murad?
Okay, I will start with example number one. This is number 6 here in the PowerPoint, but it's number 1 in this bundle. As you can see here in the Arabic, it says, إن علينا جمعه وقرآنه. جمعه وقرآنه. It's two words. It's combining together and it's reading. It says in the Arabic, surely upon us is it's combining or bringing it together, plus it's reading. Now, as you can see here, the clear Quran, it says, it is certainly upon us to make you memorize and recite it. This you, of course, assumes Muhammad. It shoves him in there in an indirect way. And memorize, it's not memorize. Jama'a is collect or bring together. Never memorize. And recite, it's wrong because Qur'anu means reading. The very same word reading, it's like in the English, reading between the lines. So you can say recite between the lines. But the idea here in general is that it says make you. So it takes the text to another direction, and people, of course, reading it only in English will assume that this is talking to Muhammad. Here in Sahih International, it says, surely upon us is its collection, and then it says in your heart, of course, it will be Muhammad, and to make possible its recitation. So as you can see here, in a very indirect way, Muhammad is being shoved in there in these two translations. Of course, there are translations that is worse. I'm taking the two famous ones that Muslim converts usually go back to. The verse is saying, surely upon us is its combination and reading. It's reading. But that is not good enough for them. They must distort it and stuff Muhammad in there. This is the sin, standard Islamic narrative, manifesting like demons. This is a big problem. This is example number 6. Do you have any comment about this?
No, I think it's terrific. I mean, this is why we need an Arab speaker like you to make sure that that when you read it, it is clear what it says in Arabic, but they had to put a commentary onto it to impose to make sure that Muhammad's in there. Great stuff. I'm glad you caught that.
Yes, and an English speaker, I only ask him one thing when he sees any verse. Just look at the length of the Arabic. One, two, three, four. 4 words. You can't have all of this. This looks wrong. So 4 words can't be all of this long sentence. This is just for the English reader. I'm just empowering him or her to think for himself about this part.
This is what we call commentary. You're adding an awful lot of editorial comment.
Exactly. Now here, this is a very powerful example also. It's jahiliya, the word jahiliya. In the Arabic it says وَقَرْنَ فِي بِيُوتِكُنَّ وَلَا تَبَرَّجْنَ تَبَرُّجْ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ الْأُولَى. This is the word we are looking at, الجاهلية الأولى. 2 words. In English it will be 2 words. الجاهلية, ignorance. الأولى, the first. So the first, ignorance. This is the ultra literal translation. But what happens here with the translators? The clear Quran says pre-Islamic ignorance. Here he made this assumption, pre-Islamic ignorance. Why? Because of course he reads in Al-Tabari and the standard Islamic narrative that there is this pre-Islamic pagan past. So he superimposed it here. He ruined the text. And here Abd al-Halim, this is the one which Andrew Tate uses. I got high definition pictures and just kept zooming in to see which translation he's reading, because this is something that I am very fond of now. In the pagan past, this is what Abd al-Halim is saying. So he didn't say the first ignorance at all. He just said in the pagan past. So he ruined it completely. He reconstructed the words. The reality is, the text is saying the first ignorance, meaning a state or condition of ignorance. Like I can tell someone you used to be very ignorant in your 20s. This is a state or condition. This is not an era. This is a wrong assumption. This is anti-linguistics. This is against the Quran. Now here, we are still with the same jahiliya word. إذ جعل الذين كفروا في قلوبهم الحمية حمية الجاهلية. The word jahiliya here. The Quran is actually saying he made those who have covered, or as in their hearts, the fervor of the ignorance. But here, as you can see, the clear Quran, Mustafa Khattab is saying pre-Islamic ignorance again, and then he adds a footnote. It says this is when the pagans prevented the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he kept going on and on and on. This is tafseer. This is an assumption that comes from the sin. It's not in the Arabic text. Then why did they add this pre-Islamic ignorance when it's not in the Arabic text? Because they are blinded by the sin, which asserts a pre-Islamic pagan past. So this is about Jahiliyyah, and I want to hear, of course, your comment about this.
This is fascinating. This is all I've ever grown up with. I've never knew that this has to do with immature people and people who are, to begin with, who are ignorant. And I've always assumed Jahiliyyah was always pre-Islamic. There was always the pagan past. I had no idea that there's another way to read this. So this is the first time I'm hearing this.
Yeah, and the way I'm reading it is actually the more primitive way, the easier way. What they are doing is mental gymnastics. It's just saying al-jahiliyyah, meaning the ignorance, the first state or condition of ignorance. Could
It's
this
talking
be
about immaturity, is what you're saying then. This is talking about immaturity. Am I correct?
In a way, yes. It could be pre-Islamic, but pre-Islamic condition of ignorance. It's not an era. They make you think that this is a certain era, like we say the medieval times or something. This is the fraud. This is the problem. But it's just in the context of being ignorant. That's the idea. It's easier than they think. They make it more difficult.
So just to be clear, this is not about an era. It's actually about a people's ignorance, individuals' ignorance.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Stop and think. Have you not, when you're discussing with Muslims, they always keep saying that this is really an attack against Christians and Jews, that we are part of the ignorance because we have corrupted our scriptures, so that these verses are warning them, when in reality this has nothing to do with the eras or that which came before the Christians and Jews that predated Islam. It's about everybody's condition, including those who were in Islam at that time.
Exactly. Exactly.
Fascinating, because I've always heard this from Muslims. We are the problem. We corrupted it. Therefore, the scripture had been corrupted. That's why God had to send Muhammad to bring us out of ignorance, bring us out of Jahiliyyah, because you are the problem. You're the Jahiliyyah. And for anybody to be attracted by Christianity or Islam, you're going back to ignorance. Now I can see this had nothing. This is a big, I mean, this in and of itself has a huge amount of impact and application for us as Christians and Jews who get hit with this all the time. We should not be using, we should correct this and say, this has nothing to do with us. It has to do with you guys, everybody. It has to do with ignorance of individual ignorance. That's what it's talking about. And you've been posed on this for years and centuries. Man, I mean, that's going to change an awful lot of our discussions in the future.
Yeah, exactly. They have no foot to stand on, and they can't build a case that Jahiliyyah is an era of pre-Islamic ignorance, and also including Christians and Jews. They can't do that without the standard Islamic narrative at all. That's the
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. Fascinating.
So now we will move to another example, and this is an example of shoving Mecca in there. As you can see here in the Arabic text, is saying وهذا كتاب أنزلناه مباركا مصدق الذي بين يديه ولتنذر القرى. The word in Arabic is al-Qura. Two words, mother of settlements. Mother of settlements. Now, what are these people doing here, these translators? Here, the clear Quran, he just keeps it as mother of cities, but then he has to shove in this footnote, and he says this is an honorary title given to Mecca. I don't know how did he know this. And here Sahih International, it's mother of cities, i.e. Mecca. This is not in the Arabic. And here Taqi Osmani is saying mother of all towns, i.e. Mecca. Hilali and Khan, mother of towns, i.e. Mecca. Where did they get this? The sin made them do it. The standard Islamic narrative made them do it. And actually, of course, you know Paul Ellis, he made a very powerful series with you. The mother of settlements might very much mean Jerusalem. Jerusalem was the mother of settlements, and it was, of course, the most important city back in this time, and maybe even till today. So people, when they shove Mecca in there, they are hindering academic progress. They are thwarting people in their footsteps to make the right conclusions and the right decisions. Of course, in my translation, I have mother of settlements, and then I keep quiet because people wanna discuss further. I can't lock the text into the standard Islamic narrative, or else I'm actually not respecting the English audience. You see?
Oh, this is brilliant. I mean, this is exciting. I mean, you're really helping us out here, Murad. This is one that I've always been hammered with, and I've always known that the mother of settlements, it cannot be Mecca. It has to be something that's archaic. It has to be something that's been around there for thousands of years. And Mecca didn't even exist in the 7th century. If the Quran was even being written, why doesn't it specify Mecca? Why does it call the mother of settlements? To understand that, you are right. It has to be Jerusalem, the oldest of all cities, religiously speaking, for the Jews and the Christians, and also the third most holy shrine for the Muslims today. But that even is a misnomer. If you don't have Mecca there, you've got to find it for it. If this is the oldest city in the history of mankind, it's where Adam and Eve went to. You can't get any older than that. It's where Abraham in chapter 21 goes and destroys the idols in the Masjid al-Haram, which again is another, you're probably going to get into that. Masjid al-Haram is immediately appropriated and assumed to be the Kaaba. Well, that cannot be if you'd have no city that they even was existed there in the 7th century, because Abraham was living in 1900 BC. So obviously, this imposing of the mother of all cities and making it and grabbing it and saying this has to be Mecca is not only historically wrong, it's grammatically wrong.
Yes, and actually, it's disrespecting the Quran because if you read the Quran, you will see that it has no synonyms. When the Quran uses a word, it actually means it. Because back in the day, it's not like today when you have typewriter and you can say stuff and its synonyms. No, just the act of writing was a privilege.
Mhm.
So they're not gonna write synonyms. They write stuff because every single word is very important and it has a very specific meaning. But as you can see here, the most Muslim translators, they do not respect the Quran. They just superimpose stuff over it so that they lock you into the standard Islamic narrative, which is wrong.
Mm.
That's the
Mm.
idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant stuff.
Now here we have more shoving of Mecca. This verse it says إن أول بيت وضع للناس للذي ببكة مبارك ببكة. Now I will just ask the people who are listening to us, what do you hear me saying? Am I saying Mecca or Becca? I'm saying
Oh,
Becca with a B.
you're saying it with a B. You're correct.
So here, these people, they say Becca, but again, they won't let it slip. Sahih International, they say Becca, then they say i.e. Mecca, an assumption built on the sin standard Islamic narrative, or I call it sometimes standard Islamic hoax. And here Hilali and Khan, he says Becca, and then he says Mecca. How so? How so? And here, these people, Taqi Osmani and Abdul Halim, they didn't even say Becca, they just said Mecca, as if the word Becca is not in Arabic. But this word also, it might mean Becca, Valley of Becca, and now again we are close to Jerusalem. So you see how they thwart and hinder academic progress by locking it into Mecca when it's actually a mistake. Becca has nothing to do with Mecca.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question here. This is, and a lot of people don't really know Arabic like you can, but isn't it the case where every Arabic word or every word in Arabic has three consonants? Am I correct?
Yes, most of them, yes.
At the root.
It
So
it
what are the
boils
three?
down to the root at three consonants,
So
yes.
what is the root for Becca here? What are the three consonants that you would claim here?
Well, this is a proper name. This doesn't have these three consonants because this is a borrowed name. This is as I say the name J. Smith in Arabic. I will have to write it in a way that captures all the uh, like how you hear it. So Becca, it might be a Hebrew word meaning Becca.
Okay,
It has
would
no
it though, even in
root.
Arabic, because you have a shadda, so you have a doubled ka and you have a b. Wouldn't it be ba kaka?
I don't think so. It would be Becca, just the way it's written,
Okay,
and
the
not
three
everything
consonant in
that.
Mecca.
No, Mecca also doesn't have a root. This is the problem. These are just names. So when you borrow names, you just have to write them in a way so that they sound right. But in Arabic, if I say what's the past for Becca so that I get a root, I will not find anything. But it's only close to buka, meaning weeping. Becca, if we will say Becca in Arabic, it means he was weeping. So
Okay, here,
again, you are close to value of weeping.
okay, here's another. I'm going to do two more things, two more questions. One is, and this is what Muslims have thrown back at me, when you look at Bakka, the B, the dot there would not have existed anyways in the 7th century because there were no dots that early. So when it was written in its original text, it would have just been a smiley face. Why could that not have been a meme that they made into a B?
Well, this has multiple problems. First off, they're saying that the Quran is not very much preserved, and the B got into meme and the meme into B. This is a big problem. Second is if you go to Islamic awareness website, they will be very proud to show very early inscriptions with dots there. So these people here, they say the dots are early, and then here they say there were no dots. Even if you have just this smiley face here, how would this be changed into meme? Mimi will have to make a stroke like this. This is a jump. This is not really. And actually, just looking here at what the text is saying, إن أول بيت وضع للناس, the first house, not house, بيت, better be home, would be the one situated for the people at Becca. This is what it's saying. If they don't like this, then they don't like the Hafs Quran. And then let's go back and study the manuscripts. I have no problem.
Okay, I want you to look and show right after Becca, what's the word that follows it and what's the first letter there?
This is Mubarak, meme.
There's the meme, right?
Yeah.
You need to have that letter. You notice, people, it's a circle. Whereas ba, the B, even if you didn't have the dots, it's not a circle. Okay, so even there destroys that notion that this could have been Mecca. Because if they'd wanted to, they had the meme right there, right next to it, that they could have used there. They didn't. It's a smiley face, regardless of where you put a dot above and below. And I don't agree with the Islamic Awareness website. If you look at the earliest manuscripts, those dots are not there, not in the 7th century. Even in the 8th century, on the earliest manuscripts, the earliest that you see it is on the Topkapi manuscript, which is not early 8th century. It's now been dated to the late 8th century. So those dots, and notice they're in a different color, that means they've been added at a later date. But they're not all the way through. It's piecemeal, and there's no standardization on those dottings. So I would suggest that if you're going to make this into Mecca, you've got to have the letter that you have your cursor under right now, over there with the U, with the Dhamma above it. That it has to look like that, not like what you're seeing here over there in the B.
Yes, exactly. And as I'm saying, the Quran is very precise when it says certain names, and just assuming that this is a mistake, then they probably shot themselves in the foot, because this means that the Quran is not really preserved. And so that's their problem if they say that. That's their problem.
And I was just wanted to bring one more thing in, and we'll stop on this end because we are going to run out of time. One more thing. There is a Becca Valley. You've already mentioned it. There is a place called Becca. And what's interesting, getting back to uh, uh, Peter, what's his name? Paul Ellis. Paul Ellis's thesis. If this is all referring to Jerusalem, look and see where when the pilgrims came to Jerusalem, where was the place they stopped at before they went into Jerusalem? They always stopped in Becca to do their last ablutions, to freshen up before they went into Jerusalem itself. Obviously, this must be that it's referring to, and not the Mecca that no one has, that didn't even exist when the pilgrims were coming to Jerusalem. So there is a Becca that does support this. And you intimated that earlier, but that all the more suggests that this is a Jewish tradition. This is not a Islamic tradition.
Yeah, and also we have some level of confidence that probably the very first Muslims, or if as we will look at the manuscripts, they call them the Ishmaelites or the Hagarenes. They went to Jerusalem, and the Quran knows the topography of Jerusalem well, and it also mentions Jahannam, which is Valley of Hinnom. Of course, Paul Ellis made a much stronger case than I am, and he looked at all the references. So I have no problem at all with this Becca being Valley of Weeping or Valley of Becca. The most problem I have is with these translators
Yeah,
who
yeah.
shove Mecca in there. That's the biggest problem. If they just leave it as Becca, then they are all good.
Okay, and let me tell you, and you can answer this, why is it they have to have Mecca here? What's the problem?
Well, to be honest, this is something that I didn't really go very much into, but I think it will be a problem for the standard Islamic narrative if they don't have this as Mecca. They have to make it the oldest city in Saudi Arabia.
Absolute. It has to be there because it is where Adam and Eve were sent to. There's nothing earlier. It has to be there because it's where Abraham lived and rebuilt the Kaaba. It has to be there because that's where Muhammad was born and grew up and spent the first 50 of his 60 years. So it has to be there. And there's only one other reference where Mecca is in the Quran, and that's in chapter 48, verse 24. So you can see they absolutely got to have Mecca. So they're pushing it and they're imposing it in the one place they shouldn't because it's grammatically incorrect, it's theologically incorrect, and it's linguistically incorrect.
Yeah, so what I'm looking at is the linguistics and how the word sounds. Just the English speaker, when he hears Becca, then I have, when I romanize it into English, I have to put Becca and just keep quiet and let the academics do the work and look further into it. Despite the text saying Becca, a lot of translators just have Mecca in there because they are blinded by the sin. And of course, as you noted out, that it has to be there so that it will be the oldest place on earth. This hinders academic progress as it gives the false impression that we know for certainty that Becca is Mecca, and this is not true. We do not know if Becca is Mecca, and most probably they're not the same.
Listen, this has been great. We'll end this segment there because we're going to go over time, but we're just on number 8 out of 70. So you can see we have a long way to go. But folks, can you see why this is important? In almost every case, have you noticed what Murad is finding here is that this imposition, these are real theological problems. These are historical problems for the Muslims. You've got to get Muhammad in there. So you impose him there in chapter 75, verse 17. You've got to try to shut down the Christians and Jews and those who have come before. And you've got to say why Islam is important because it corrects what has come before. So you take the word Jahiliyyah and you say these are the ignorance of the people that came before without saying no, this is the ignorance of Muslims themselves or of anybody, individuals who have a period of ignorance before they know who God is. And then they've got to find Mecca. They can't find Mecca because it's only there one time in the entire Quran. And so they take a verse that looks like, from what Murad's finding, has more to do with Jerusalem and the valley outside of Jerusalem. It has to do with much further north, 1,000 miles further north, and they have to impose the word Mecca when it is not. You can't do that linguistically, and you can't do that orthographically. In both cases, theologically speaking and historically, you've got problems here. So this imposition, we're going to see more of them. But Murad, thank you so much. These are 3 great examples. You've got many more to go. This is Jay in Murad then.